Well, I've been wanting to do this review for a very long time, and I guess the time was just right.
Jack Deebs created his own world. It made him very successful.
You're Jack Deebs, the creator of Cool World, right? I can't believe this.
Now he thinks he's going home to the real world. But he's wrong. Real wrong.
Welcome to my world.
You're not in Kansas anymore!
Freeze. Cool World Police. I'm a cartoonist. I drew all this.
This place exists with or without you.
Get a little closer here, babe. Give us a kiss.
Go away.
I'm out of here.
I've been waiting for you, darling.
Noids do not have sex with doodles. It's the oldest law in Cool World.
I just want to be real.
You gotta slow down.
Not on your life, pal.
This place should be erased.
Hey, it's a living.
Cool World.
I mentioned Cool World a long time ago when I reviewed Monkeybone, and I feel the same way about this movie that I did with that one. I'm less mad at the movie itself and more mad at the studio for tampering with a person's creative vision and just making it an absolutely muddled PG-13 mess. Cool World is a 1992 American live-action animated black comedy fantasy film directed by Ralph Bakshi and written by Michael Grays and Mark Victor. I would read the IMDb description, but it's about like multiple paragraphs long, so this is the best that I could get. So the reason this movie exists is for two different reasons. The main reason is Ralph Bakshi, who is a very talented and very creative person. I don't really care for a lot of his movies. I have not seen Fritz the Cat or its sequel. I've only seen that video Saberspark did on it, and I intend to keep it that way. But there are movies that he's made that I did like. I mean, I enjoyed his animated Lord of the Rings movies. I liked his movie Wizards. I thought that it was a really good amalgamation of what makes his stuff unique. You know, it's an animated movie, but there's a lot of adult content in it. Use of rotoscoping, that was like a huge thing of his because he usually worked with very low budgets. The point is, Ralph Bakshi is the kind of director where he has a very specific vision, and I feel like that's a very important thing when it comes to directors. I definitely think directors of his type fall in line more with people like John Waters and even a little bit of John Carpenter, because I feel like those guys, they wanted to make the movies that they wanted to make. They didn't really care about budgets. They only wanted to make the films that they specifically wanted to. And when it comes to an artistic merit, I think that's very, very credible. The other reason this movie got made was because the studios wanted to make another Who Framed Roger Rabbit, because that was a huge success. And Paramount decided, hey, we should make our own movie like that. So Ralph Bakshi goes to them with a script that he came up with. And originally the script was meant to be this rated R horror film where it's about a cartoonist who has a daughter who's a half live action, half cartoon monster that kills people. And it's like, all right, that sounds like something that, I mean, I'd be at least interested to see how it played out. But of course the studio, like they usually do with the fucking studio meddling, they got the script and went, no, you're gonna make the movie the way we want you to make it. So of course movie was rewritten all to hell and it was converted into this PG-13 mess, much like Monkeybone. And that's the thing, it's very interesting to imagine that back then PG-13 was like a big selling point for studios, because back then studio executives often thought, oh well, PG-13 means that you could market it to kids, but parents would also have to take them to it. And, you know, you could rely on the whole marketing strategy of, it's not necessarily like a kid's movie, but, you know, it's something that you can still bring the kids to. It's not rated R, it's not too gory, not too much explicit stuff. And it's just like, I really just wish this was rated R, because it clearly wanted to be, and it just feels so muddied. And these kind of movies are a very tricky thing to get right. The reason that I think Roger Rabbit is like the gold standard for these kind of movies is not just the fact that overall, you know, very tight script, very good actors, very likable cast of characters, very impressive effects for the time, and they still hold up after all this time. The reason that something like that works and something like this doesn't is because Roger Rabbit, you could tell, was something that somebody wanted to make. This feels like something that started off as something someone wanted to make, but the studio kept giving them notes and being like, no, here's how you're going to do it. Do it like this. And hey, maybe there was some of that with Roger Rabbit, but the end result was at least consistent. And then you get to stuff like Space Jam, which the first Space Jam is not a very good movie, but I do have a slight nostalgia for it. It clearly only exists because of sneaker commercials, but if you watch it through a nostalgic lens, I can kind of forgive it. I will say this, though, in Cool World's defense, it at least felt like a movie. It didn't just feel like one big nostalgia bukkake party that went on for an hour and a half, 2 hours, like Space Jam 2, or I didn't see the Chip and Dale movie, so I can't really say. I've heard good things. I've also heard bad things. I can't say, but specifically Space Jam 2 felt like a 2-hour-long version of an HBO Max commercial. Cool World, while not very good, still felt like it was at least a movie. So what is Cool World about? Well, okay, so we start after World War II, and Brad Pitt plays a guy named Frank. He comes home to his mother, takes her out for a ride on his motorcycle, end up getting into an accident when they get hit by some drunk drivers. The mom gets injured and hospitalized, and she's like taken off to a hospital. You know what's weird? Despite the car accident, neither of them look like horribly injured. Like, it made me just wonder, like, so what, did the mom die of a heart attack? Like, there's like not a drop of blood on her. I think the worst that Frank has is a couple of like rips in his jacket, and his hair's kind of frazzled. Then, miraculously, as his mom's getting carted away, he ends up getting sucked into a cartoon universe called Cool World by a scientist named Dr. Vincent Whiskers. What you need to know is that he's a cartoon scientist, and he was trying to jump from the cartoon world to our world. But instead he ended up pulling Brad Pitt into their world. Jump forward a couple years later. This is like, what, 40, 50 years later, something like that. And we see our other main character, the other live-action lead we have, Jack, played by Gabriel Byrne. And he is a cartoonist who has been locked away in prison for 10 years because he tried murdering the guy that was having an affair with his wife. And in that time, he created a successful series of comic books called Cool World, which were based off of dreams and visions that he had of the imaginary world that, of course, Brad Pitt got sucked into. So he made a successful comic book series out of it. Once he gets out of prison, he ends up getting sucked into the world through his comic book. And, well, that was apparently the big selling point of this movie when they were advertising it. Not only did they try advertising this as the dark, gritty, edgy alternative to Who Framed Roger Rabbit, they also tried advertising it as like, oh, well, that was a movie about cartoons in the real world. This is about humans interacting in a world of nothing but cartoons. But here's the problem with that. Who Framed Roger Rabbit did that in like the last act of the movie when Eddie Valiant, Bob Hoskins' character, goes to Toontown in the last act of the movie. And there was a reason for that. It was mostly because of budgetary limitations, but it worked a lot better there. I think there's only one time where it comes off as like a little bit fake. It's the part where he kind of squashes like a pancake on the floor when he's in the elevator with Droopy. But with this movie, you have it like, oh yeah, they're in a world of cartoon characters and there's all this crazy, wacky nonsense going on. The reason that it doesn't work is because you can clearly tell that they're on a live action set. Like, for example, they'll be in a nightclub and then they stand at a regular live action bar. They sit down on regular live-action couches and stuff like that. And there's even points where they're in the apartments of some of these cartoon characters, and they're interacting with what are obviously fake cardboard cutouts of couches and furniture. And it's like, all right, that's so obvious. Like, I don't know if that was something that they intended to go back and add two-dimensional imagery on top of, like rotoscope maybe, but it just felt really fucking lazy when it got to that part.
You're just a regular true believer of law and order, huh?
It's here where we introduce some of the other characters we're going to have to be dealing with for the rest of the film. The main one to focus on is Hollywood. That's really her name, and it's very appropriate that it sounds like a porn star name, because Holly is a horny little minx. She's played by Kim Basinger, however you pronounce that. There are about 4 times she does like sexy dances, and at first it starts off kind of cool, and then by the 3rd or 4th time they do it, it's like, all right, now it's just fucking, it's not even titillating anymore.
I think she's got a thing for you, don't you? That's sweet. But don't flatter yourself. She's a waste of ink.
Point of her character is that she wants to have sex with a human, or as they call them, noids, because if a doodle, as they call them, instead of calling them toons like they did in Roger Rabbit, they call the cartoon characters doodles. So if a doodle has sex with a noid, then the doodle will become a human or become live action, and they can teleport over to the human world. And that's Holly's dream. She wants to live in the human world.
I've been checking up on what these Noid dames have got going in the real world, and I want it! When they touch something, they feel it. And when they taste something, they really taste it. And when they do it with a man, oh, they really do it.
Some of the other characters we have are, there are these like little sidekicks that tag along with her. They're these like little humanoid looking things. And they're pretty much like this movie's version of Minions. They're really obnoxious. They do nothing but make noise. And every time they're on screen, I just wanted them to leave. That was something that really annoyed me with this movie. There are tons of scenes where you'll have characters do dialogue-heavy sequences with each other, and then, just because they could, they interjected a bunch of cartoon characters randomly popping up in the background, or sometimes in the foreground, just making noise. And it's really distracting, and it's really annoying.
Hey, Frank?
What you looking for, Frank?
Some of the other characters include Lynette, who is supposed to be Brad Pitt's cartoon girlfriend, and they kind of have a subplot in which she wants to have sex with him because they really love each other, but of course he says that he can't do that because it would go against the rules of Cool World that, you know, noids do not have sex with doodles. And he also has a sidekick, because in that window of time that he's been in Cool World, he became a cop. And so he has this sidekick who's a cartoon spider named Nails. And honestly, Lynette and Nails are probably the best characters in this movie because, I mean, like, Nails is pretty much supposed to be the comic relief. But honestly, he was a better comic relief than those fucking annoying Minion characters because he was at least somewhat grounded in some kind of sense of normalcy, even with some of the wacky banter and stuff that he had with Brad Pitt. And Lynette's character arc was actually a lot more interesting than Holly's because, I mean, she actually had a personality. Holly just felt like she was there for eye candy, which, again, starts off kind of cool, but then as the movie progresses, it got really fucking lame. And pretty much most of the movie is her trying to get Jack to have sex with her, and finally he ends up caving. They have sex, but because it's a PG-13, you don't get to see anything, so yeah. Again, there are tons of, like, really obtuse sexual references all throughout this thing, and it's like, if this was rated R, they could have gone that full mile, but because the studio went, no, make it PG-13. That way, you know, we get teenagers to go see it, and, you know, parents will have to watch it with them. It's a whole thing. It made it so less interesting. And you get to the third act. Because Jack and Holly had sex, Holly becomes live action, so now she's live action Kim Basinger. And because the movie takes place in Vegas when it's not in Cool World, they go to Vegas, they stop at a hotel, and of course she wants to have all the drinks that are on the menu. She at one point gets on stage and starts singing with Frank Sinatra Jr. Yeah, really? They somehow managed to get him to be in this?
Here we sit and we chat. What are we thinking of? Let's not make with the patter, baby. Let's make love.
Then then one of the side effects of a Noid having sex with a doodle starts to kick in, because then Jack starts turning into a cartoon character, and Holly starts turning into a cartoon character, but not the cartoon character she was before. She starts turning into a cartoon clown for some reason. And of course, Brad Pitt travels back to the live-action world to try and stop Holly and bring her back to Cool World, so that way there's balance between the worlds. Because that's the other thing they establish, that if cartoon characters leave Cool World and like too many of them are in the real world, then both realities will start to fall apart or collide into each other or something like that. That's when the scientist guy from the beginning of the movie comes back, because that was the reason Holly wanted to leave, because of this urban legend among Cool World, which is Vegas Vinny, and Vegas Vinny was actually the scientist from the beginning.
Vegas Vinny made the spike, crossed over, and became the owner of the Union Plaza Hotel.
Vegas Vinny is a fairy tale, Wood. Doodle moms tell it to doodle kids to help them go to sleep.
You're Doodle.
In Cool World, they knew me as Whiskers. Dr. Vincent Whiskers.
Didn't you touch the spike?
Sure, I touched it, but I couldn't hold it. No one can!
It doesn't make sense. The point is, too many cartoon characters are in the real world, and Cool World and the human world are about to collide into each other, so you then have this horrible nightmare sequence happening of humans turning into doodles. At that point, I was like, man, I don't give a shit. I want this to be over. It was just getting so insane, even more than it was before. I was like, okay. That's what I'm talking about with the Roger Rabbit comparisons. Roger Rabbit was a movie that had a story, and it knew when to slow down, and it knew when to have proper character development. Nobody in this really has a character arc, aside from maybe the thing with Brad Pitt and his cartoon girlfriend. That was about it. And they're not the main focus. They're too busy showing off sexy cartoon Kim Basinger trying to have sex with Gabriel Byrne. The reason that the two worlds collide is because Holly finds out that the spike device that the scientist guy created is on top of the hotel or whatever. She goes up to try and get the spike so that way she can merge both the real world and the cartoon world together. Brad Pitt tries to stop her, but she ends up pushing him off the building, and he dies. The worlds merge. Again, no one is really fazed by it. But then Gabriel Byrne turns into a cartoon superhero, and he grabs the spike and he uses it to, you know, separate both worlds again. So now Cool World is back to the way it was, and the human world is back to the way it was. And it's here where they pull a huge plot point out of their ass, and you have it that apparently Brad Pitt can now come back to life as a cartoon character because Holly killed him, and apparently if a doodle kills a Noid, then that means that the Noid will become a doodle.
Oh, so what? Well, what happens to Noids who traffic in the Cool World, Nails? When they get killed by a doodle, they become a doodle themselves.
Hot dog! Dig it! Dig me!
But yeah, Brad Pitt has now come back to life as a cartoon character, which means that him and Lonette can have sex, finally. And it was like, okay, you know what? If the movie... First of all, if the movie established that at the beginning in some capacity, it probably would have made sense. The way they go about it really just feels like a last-minute thing that they added to the script. It really does feel like they were just like, oh crap, you know, the studio wants us to bring this character back, so what do? If a cartoon kills a human, then that brings them back to life as a cartoon. Fuck it, I don't know. As for Holly, she's now stuck in a comic book with superhero Jack. And then the movie just kind of ends. And it was such an abrupt way of ending, too. I was like, I cannot believe that's actually how they decided to end this fucking thing. Like I said at the beginning of this video, I feel the same way about Cool World in the same way I feel about Monkeybone. These are not good movies, but at the same time, I'm not really mad at the film, and there was plenty of opportunity for interesting things to happen, and like the concept isn't terrible. Thing is, this movie has a very interesting premise, and I would like to have seen the original version of the film as the way that it was intended to be made, the original Ralph Bakshi script. Even if it wasn't very good, I would still be more interested to see that versus this, which just, like I said, just reeked of studio interference. And it just felt like the studio kept badgering them to like, no, do this. No, we want you to do it like this. Thank God Ralph Bakshi eventually went back and decided to make another movie. It was years after the fact. He made a movie in 2015. From what I can tell, it was very low budget, kind of back to his roots. Because this was the most big budget movie that Ralph Bakshi ever made. And it was both a critical and financial failure. It did horribly at the box office. And yeah, critics just ripped it apart. Very deep below all the crap, I could easily imagine this movie being good. And I wish that there was a little bit more fine-tuning. And you have a couple of interesting ideas buried in there, but it just feels outweighed by all the non-stop noise and the annoying characters and the non-existent character development with some of the main characters. And the constant times where it's trying way too hard to be like, oh, you know, this ain't Who Framed Roger Rabbit. We're the gritty, edgy version of that. And it's like, dude, Who Framed Roger Rabbit was pretty gritty and could be fucking terrifying, especially in the third act when it got to Christopher Lloyd. Aside from some interesting ideas, I just felt sorry for the movie more than anything. I was like, man, I really wanted this to not suck. If you want to go through Ralph Bakshi's entire career, then yeah, sure. You know, see the most big budget movie he ever made, and yeah, I personally would recommend Wizards out of all of his movies. If you're gonna watch one movie from Ralph Bakshi, I highly recommend Wizards. As for what we're doing next time on Blockbuster Show, we're gonna be talking about not one but two theatrical Tom and Jerry movies. The one from 1992. And the one from last year, 2021. Until then, guys, I'm Adam Sykes of the Blockbuster Show, and we will see you guys in the next video.
What a beautiful landscape. Let's see. We can put the house over here, the studio over here. I'll still draw, of course. We'll raise children over here. I'll fight crime over there. Oh, we're going to be deliriously happy, honey poo.
Pencil dick.